Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate. In tonight's show, we're going to be focusing on the presidential tour that took him to France, to the city of Biarritz, to attend the G7 summit, the seven biggest economies and world powers in the world. And we're also going to be shedding light on the TCAD summit, the 7th edition of this conference that will be taking place in Yokohama, Japan, starting tomorrow. And joining us here in the studio to shed more light on this issue is Dr. Ramy Fahim, the strategic planning and economic expert. We're also joined by Dr. Mohammed Khouly, the international media expert. Gentlemen, pardon, Mr. Mohammed Khouly, the international media expert. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start our discussion, let's check out this report regarding President Sisi and the Japanese Prime Minister to inaugurate the 7th edition of the TCAD in Japan, Yokohama, and we'll be right back.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe are scheduled to inaugurate the 7th Tokyo International Conference of African Development TCAD on Wednesday. This edition of the conference is held under the title Pushing Forward African Development Through Peoples, Technology and Innovation. A number of representatives of international donor institutions are expected to attend the conference, including those of the United Nations Development Programme, the African Union Commission and the International Bank. The conference will focus on three main issues of cooperation between Africa and Japan, including economic transformation, improvement of business climate through encouraging private investments and innovation, as well as enhancing security, stability and peace in societies. The expanded inaugural session of the conference will start at 3 p.m. Japan local time, with the attendance of leaders, and will last for an hour and tackle general topics concerning the future of TCAD and the development in Africa. The second session will be held at 4:45 p.m. Japan local time at the Yokohama International Conference Center and will focus on economic transformation and improving business climate, in addition to consolidating the participation of the private sector. The following day, the third expanded session will be held under the title Business Dialogue between the public and private sectors, whilst the fourth expanded session will be held under the title Deepening the Sustainable and Enhanced Society. The second day will witness another session discussing in an objective way a number of issues related to science, technology, innovation, developing human capitals, educating youth, climate change, agriculture, lightning and impacts of dangers and the blue economy. A dinner banquet will be attended by the participants of the conference. The final day of the three-day conference will witness the fifth expanded session that tackles the enhancement of peace and stability, whilst the sixth expanded meeting will review a report over the whole sessions and will be attended by the heads of the sessions.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Starting off our discussion right away, Mr. Mohammed Khouly. Now, this will be the 7th edition of the TCAD that will be inaugurated between President Sisi, obviously, as President and head of the African Union this year, and the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Now, Japan wants to actually hold the summit now once every 3 years, and there seems to be a great importance and a lot of significance between different continents trying to really establish and strengthen their relationship with Africa. How do you see the previous TCAD editions, and what do you expect from the coming 7th edition of TCAD?
Let's say in the 7th TCAD, I think it's the most important. First of all, it's the most up-to-date.
Yes.
Second, it follows, as you know and as all of us know, the France conference of the G7. In the same time, it witnesses the presence of Egypt and the Egyptian leadership, who is still very occupied with the African continent. Now we are, as all people know, that we are the chairman of the African Union. In the same time, I think the Egyptian leadership is trying to invest the long history of Egyptian contribution, which goes back decades, since, let's say, the 60s, in which we were Cairo with the beacon of the movement for independence, of national emancipation in most of the African continent countries. This contribution, this legacy, which I think the older generation of the African leaders and African intelligentsia still remembers at the same time. And we want to invest these things. Invest, it means, in my opinion, in a very positive way, in a very constructive way, through what Mr. Sisi calls, which I like, the collective will. We have a collective will, we and the African people, and it's good that Egypt took this will and took the African interests and the African aspiration, you see, to Japan. Why? We have to, in, let's say, in the group of 77, we have China. In the same time, we have outside the group, we have Japan. China had its own chance. That was let's say 2 or 3 decades ago in Africa, and they were so smart that they tried to learn the learned lesson of the imperialistic epoch in which Africa and the African people suffered. So they established what they call joint ventures. They didn't want to feel that the African party feel that they are coming just to invest and have money and go again, go outside. In the same time, Japan is an aspiring factor or aspiring partner, and I think Japan has a lot to offer to us, I mean the Africans. In the same time, let's say that the Africa is a continent which is, as Mr. Sisi said in his speeches, the most affected, maybe, yes, party by the scourge of a climate change. This is very dangerous for us. In the same time, we have to learn the lessons which are now personified or in what's going on in Brazil, for example. Brazil has, as you know, the Amazon.
The fires.
Forests, the rainforests, and then the fires. I myself had a chance to visit or to live in this Amazon place in Brazil, because I was preparing a book on my own, and I lived there. It is something miraculous. You say, these things are here in our globe or our continents in the world. Okay, now we have these fires. We have the problem of one day Africa could be injured by the scourge of these kind of fires. We have to be very aware. We have to be very pessimistic, lest Africa should one day suffer this scourge. So, in the same time, Africa has a big potential, as we know. We are calling it in the literature all the time the virgin continent. Virgin here is not an emotional word. Virgin continent, it means, and my friend the doctor will just talk in detail, in my opinion, about what the potential of Africa as far as its agricultural land, as far as its wealth of metals and other things. I lived in Africa myself also, and Western Africa, especially a very small country, I like it, it's a Muslim country, Niger, is full of cobalt, uranium, and all other things which are so precious for the nuclear activities, you see. So Egypt now is leading the march of Africa in order to get rid of its past, imperialistic past, in the same time in order to look forward for a promising future, in the near future, I mean.
Yes, definitely. Well, Dr. Fahim, As Mr. Khouly mentioned, the African continent has a huge potential, and that's why we see a lot of different conferences and different summits taking place between the African states and the African Union and other states in different other continents. Now, we're going to be witnessing the TCAD 7 starting tomorrow. But we've also seen the China sort of summit and conference with the Arab states. Now, in the African states, what are the similarities or the differences between, for instance, the Japanese-African summit and the Chinese-African summit? They're both working on developing relations with the African states, trying to invest, trying to have joint ventures. Now, are there similarities or differences between the ones between the African states in Japan and the African states in China?
Africa is Africa.
But what about the two other Asian countries? What can they offer?
It's one valise. Our president has one valise with two target subjects. Okay. Let's talk first about this is the Great Depression. What I'm going to say is we just repeated in previous episodes before. Okay, but this is the Great Depression. The Great Depression, although we have it like something that occurs like 75, 85 years, it's the whole history. It was like that, okay? We know when the Great Depression comes, we have the anger of nature, and we can see it in the Amazon. Previously, we saw it 10 years ago with the tsunamis, and we don't know what's coming up, okay? And that's why they're afraid they have lots of problems in the climate change, okay? We have limited resources, okay? So we have a real shortage, and we don't want people go and conquer other people. And before, like Dr. Khouly was mentioning, that there was this imperialism. Africa, our African the continent of Africa is the bailout plan. Why? It's the bailout plan. It's a virgin continent. Okay, what's the problem? I will go around. Okay, what's the problem of China, the biggest industrial country in the whole world for the time being? China doesn't know how to manufacture small stuff. They manufacture en gros. Okay, it's either they go for like 10 million product that they cannot go for 100,000 or 200,000. Okay, the problem of China, it's for example, for the time being, they don't have a marketing because people cannot buy. They cannot afford to buy because of the problems. So what we need is to start to implement our targets in Africa and to start to do the real growth of Africa. So all industries will start to work in Africa. All the companies that will start. It's a real. It's something version that starts from from scratch. All right. So the problem before that, the Western, they were abusing Africa. So our valise contains one of the target subjects, no more lose-win situation. It's either win-win situation or no situation at all. Okay, Egypt for the time being, it's not only the president, we're the servants of Africa. Africa is our continent, and we're defending our continent. If you want to come to Africa, no more that you take diamonds and you give weapons and khalas. It's finished. All this is finished. We have to sit and we have to work together and win together. You win, I win. You lose, I lose. Khalas. You win, I lose. No way. No, khalas. It's finished for this. This is one of the main target subjects in the valise of the president. The other one is companies. They need to they need industrial zones. They don't have to cross all the continents to go to Africa. And the portal of Africa is Egypt for the time being. And that's why they were talking about Egypt. We should work on the infrastructure, That's what we were doing from 2014 up till now, when we were talking, if you remember, the 100,000 kilometers of roads, the ports, the airports, the electricity,
cities, the expansion of the Suez Canal,
lots of things. And we have achieved more than 67% for the time being. If you remember, it was I remember the plan was $185 billion expenditures, and now we have reached 115 or 120 out of 185. And we're working hard, and we can see it, all of us. We are working on our macroeconomics, not yet the micro, should follow up, but this is the macroeconomics for the time being. It's not only for us, but it's mainly for receiving the investments. Like when we said with the Arabs, now they don't have an opportunity to invest. So they need to defend and to protect their investments, their money, and they need a place where there is a prospect. We said Africa is the bailout plan. They cannot go to Africa. They don't have an infrastructure. We are just like getting ready our ground to receive the investments and to go to penetrate to Africa. Okay, so now we have two things. Africa, you cannot abuse it anymore. Two, we are ready with our infrastructure. Maybe before it was Russia, China and India, the three main countries investing. They want to invest and they want to export their factories here. But as we can see yesterday, Mr. Trump is trying to get close to our president and trying to like he wants a part of the investments here. And he doesn't want to lose the chance to go to Africa. Okay, I believe America is facing hell. Okay, actually the whole world is facing hell. Do you remember the numbers before when we said what was the whole debts of the world and what's the real money? Do you remember this? It was
a huge difference.
$260 trillion of debts. Actually, all the money of the world is $80 trillion, with a difference of 320%. Okay.
Yes.
So it's minus 320%. You have the whole world is facing a huge problem.
Yes. Well, Mr. Khouly, now, if we are talking about a great economic depression and recession, now looking at this TCAD summit happening tomorrow, starting off tomorrow, keeping in mind the trade war between China and the US, does that make Japan a more prosperous sort of potential for an agreement and trade cooperation between this Asian country and the African continent, maybe even much more than China because of their trade war, or it doesn't really matter, it's not going to be affecting the African countries as much?
In order to answer this question or this point, we have to stay and concentrate on Mr. Sisi's speech and his course of thinking, track of thinking about that. Yes, and my dear Dr. Ramy gave us a very detailed, rich picture about what's going on from the economic point of view. I'll try to talk about the political point of view, the political side of it. What attracted my attention in the speech, the Egyptian approach of the problem, is the talk about we have to preserve the dignity, the strength, the existence of the national state. That's the key to solve the problems of the African continent. And it's not an easy thing, and it's not a rhetorical thing. Why? Because the problem of the African states, or the African continent in general, most of them, is the African national state, which now faces a lot of problems. Let's talk about the tribal. Yesterday in the Sudan, which is the nearest African brothers to us. Yesterday there was a tribal strife in the eastern part of the Sudan, you see. In the same time, we have to remember in the 90s, as we all of us know, the Tutsis and the Hutus massacres, which was in Rwanda and Burundi. Other things in Asia, in Africa, you see, we have a potential. We have to talk about it. What is the population? Most people talk about the growth of population as a problem. In Africa, it is not. It's a big potential. It is a wealth, especially the new generation. In the same time, the African woman, we are talking, and the Egyptian people are talking, and the Egyptian discourse is talking about the women empowerment.
Yes.
This is a very good slogan, very good. We in the United Nations, we have talked about it a lot. Okay, but now the African woman is a big, it's a wealth to Africa, and I know that the African woman is a very vital factor in the African economy. In most of African continents, the women are the factors who are taking care, responsible of their economic life. You see, they are producers. They take care of agriculture. You see, everything to push the continent.
Yes. Mr. Khouly, you've touched upon a very important issue, which is the tribal conflicts and the conflicts that are taking place among African states. Do you feel that this will always be some sort of an obstacle or a challenge to overcome?
It is, especially the ethnic, you see, ethnic conflicts. You see, what happened in the Congo, for example, until now, let's say they are making children, they are recruiting children as soldiers at war, 12 years of age, and he is carrying a gun and going there, and all these things are obstructing the march of Africa towards better life.
Will it slow down the cooperation with Japan and China?
It's a path, one of the paths. But it's good that the Egyptian party, I'm not defending Egyptian party, by the way, but it's good that the Egyptian party, Egypt's leadership, is aware of this thing, that they are not just optimistic about the cooperation and the future of Africa and Egypt working with each other, and even with the Japanese investment. No. There are a lot of problems. As you know, first of all, we have the immigration problem. Africa is the source of the illegitimate immigration. In the same time, we have the Libyan problem. It's part of the African problem. All these things are accumulating unless we try to find a path to solve one by one. Or collectively in the same time.
Yes, definitely. Dr. Fahim, you've mentioned now is the time to actually cut proper deals between the different countries.
If I add
Please go ahead.
Here, you were saying we are having problems between the tribes, actually, civil wars, Nigeria, Namibia, we know all this, okay. But what was the real cause? We know, for example, in Nigeria, the big petroleum company, we're not going to mention the name, is the real cause of the wars in Nigeria.
Yes.
Okay, the traffic of not the slave, the diamond, and all these things. This is the valise of our president. No more abuse.
Yes.
Now Egypt is we have an extremely powerful army now, and our friends are coming even to stand up beside us.
Yes.
Okay. No more abuse to Africa. No more wars.
Yes. Well,
they were the cause of the wars in Africa.
Yeah. Well, this takes me to the next question. No more abuse and exploitation of the African resources. Now, you've mentioned it's a win-win situation. Yes. Okay, so how do you view a win-win situation, a win-win cooperation between different international partners and the African states? Is it just coming starting up industrial zones, having their factories. They will still extract the natural resources and use them, manufacture them, and sell them and spread them around the world. How do you see a scenario where different countries and different continents have a win-win situation with Africa?
Look, the contracting companies, they need to work. Okay, it's not about money, because money lost its value. We said the real money of the world is $80 trillion. The real debts are $260 trillion. Okay, where is the difference? The money lost its value, so it's not about money anymore. Money has no value. Okay, it's about, you're coming to invest in Africa, you have to rebuild Africa. This is, for example, the Mercedes, the Mercedes company. They need to sell Mercedes, but they need to find people to buy the Mercedes, and they don't have a problem of money. I can give you the money to buy my Mercedes so that my industry works.
So they have to create a new market as well.
Yes, and they have to go,
strengthen an existing
we have
market.
to explore the life there, and we have to improve life there.
That's it.
It's you're starting from scratch. Africa, why China, India, they want to go to come to Egypt and to do the industrial zone and then to export. They're coming with their factories. We're not building new factories. It's their factories that are coming here. And why that? Because we're having the right infrastructure. To build the infrastructure in Africa takes years.
Yes.
Okay, we don't have years. The Great Depression is now. This is the Great Depression. We have huge problems. We're just like, I don't know what we're fighting. It's there.
Dr. Fahim, do you feel Egypt is working on its infrastructure in quite a fast pace and a speedy manner?
In different aspects,
But
yes.
do you feel that the other African states are working as fast to establish this sort of infrastructure to collaborate and cooperate with the different international
We are trying to make them understand, and we are trying to help with our expertise. We cannot say our expertise. It's now, for the time being, we have all to put our hands together and to help each other. Okay. We have to. This is the Great Depression. We're all facing a real crisis. Okay, and we don't want that this crisis will finish like what was before historically, by wars.
Yes.
It's World War III.
Yes.
3 and 4, and I don't know, with the nuclear weapons,
hopefully we're not
it won't be,
gonna get that far.
but that's what we're trying to do. We have this time to cross the idea of you need resources, so you come and take the country and take the resources of the country. No, we need to cross this crisis together. By planning, by good planning, by implementing the plans, by the working together. But there is no anymore win-lose. We have to all go for the win-win situation. Okay?
Yes.
So you cannot abuse Africa anymore.
Yes, definitely.
And now we're the soldiers of Africa. Nobody will try to get close to a real sand of Africa or a small diamond of
Africa.
Definitely.
Yes, please go ahead.
Commenting on what you said, they cannot abuse Africa no more. That's okay. But the problem is that Africans sometimes abuse Africa itself. The Africans themselves. That's why.
But with the help of the West.
Well,
but if we stop the help,
that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why the Egyptian party also again raised the, not the slogan, the principle of anti-corruption campaign in Africa. And in Egypt also at the same time.
Yes.
But the anti-corruption campaign is a vital demand in order to go ahead with what's going on in the future.
Yes, and that's the political will.
Very important.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, now Africa is very much under the spotlight, and we saw that in the French city of Biarritz, where the G7 summit took place, and President Sisi was there. Let's check out this report, and we'll be right back.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi called on G7 countries to work towards finding solutions to Africa's challenges, including terrorism, and to maintain security and stability in the Dark Continent. Speaking at the G7 Africa Partnership session held in the French seaside town of Biarritz, President el-Sisi emphasized the aspirations of the peoples of the continent for peace and sustainable development, and to establish a just and sustained partnership based on common interests. He said Africa does not need to review the challenges facing it in detail, but needs to work together to find solutions. The president focused on the situation in Libya, saying it was serious and dangerous and should be given particular attention. In this regard, he called for concerted international efforts to guarantee the safety of the Libyan people and preserve the country's capabilities and resources. He stressed that the way out of the crisis in Libya was known and required political will and sincere intentions in order to begin a comprehensive political settlement process that addresses all aspects of the crisis, mainly restoring stability, eradicating terrorism, and ending foreign intervention. President el-Sisi, on the other hand, underlined the tremendous opportunities that Africa could offer to the world. He noted that if these challenges impose a responsibility on them to cooperate to confront them, African countries have equally promising opportunities and diverse potentials. He asserted that Africa has a large market and rich human resources and other attractive factors, notably projects to develop the African infrastructure with the aim of achieving regional and continental integration. The event was attended by French President Emmanuel Macron, leaders of the G7 and presidents of South Africa, Senegal, Rwanda and Burkina Faso. As part of G7 summit activities, President el-Sisi took part in a working session on climate, biological diversity and oceans. Sisi's word also expounded the African continent's viewpoint towards environment and climate change topics.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Fahim, now we saw President el-Sisi attending the G7 summit in Biarritz, France. Now, there were many issues that were raised during the summit, and obviously countering terrorism, but also there was a main focus on biodiversity and oceans and climate change. And the President in his speech said that Africa is one of the most affected areas and regions around the world by climate change and global warming, and that even though that Africa has the lowest sort of gas emissions from around the world, how do you see the group of seven, the US, the UK, Italy, France and Germany as well, how do you see them cooperating with the African states, trying to deal with global warming, dealing with climate change specifically, because they want to, as you've mentioned, protect their sort of bailout plan manifested in the African continent? How do you see different sort of mechanisms to counter this phenomenon?
Can you see our president in the last 4 years always talking about sustainable?
Yes.
Sustainable, okay? We want to limit, we want to put limits for the chemical medicines. We want to return back to nature, okay? We want to return back to, when we're talking about the climate change, Africa is full of forests. We have to, after what happened to the Amazon, losing 20% of the oxygen, are we joking? We have to protect Africa. Now this is the time to protect Africa. Green economy, green whatever we have to use for the time, for the next decade. Okay, no more ozone, whatever problems. We have to see, and we have to focus. And we have to focus on whatever is nature, natural resources. We have to work with our natural resources. We have to stop the chemical, the chemical fusions and the chemical problems that are affected by the factories and this. We have to see the pollution. We have to stop abusing the nature.
Well, how does that happen? Is that them giving the African countries money, or is it not just money but also the know-how to develop the sustainable development sort of vision that Egypt has for 2030 and African states for 2063?
Which means we had the problem of desertation on the last 30 or 40 years, even in Europe. So what we need now is we have to conquer the desert. We have to return to, and that's what we're starting here in Egypt. And we need to plant the desert. Okay, green economy. We have to go to the new projects in a sustainable way. What does it mean, sustainable? Sustainable project. What does it mean, sustainable project? We don't have wastes. We're using everything natural. I don't want to use any more things that are chemicals, and we're all affected in our bodies, in our life. We have to return back to nature. The medicine, we have to return. Let's forget about what happened in the last, what happened in the last 100 years with the petroleum companies, with the medicine companies, and we have to forget this era.
Yes.
We have to start a new era, a new natural era, or we're all going to lose. What happened in the Amazon is a real alert. What's up?
Yes.
We're losing we're losing we're losing Earth. We're losing Earth, and if there is a war, it will be nuclear. We're losing Earth. I don't know, but it seems that it's much easier to lose Earth than to keep it. So
yes.
We have to work on how to keep Earth. This is how to survive.
It's quite unfortunate, definitely.
And it's a win-win, but it's a lose-lose. It's a win-win worldwide, not Africa, but it's worldwide.
Definitely.
But it's a lose-lose. We're losing all. We will all lose.
Yes, definitely. Well, Mr. Khouly, now, during this summit, there were sort of sidelines, meetings on the sidelines between the Egyptian president, along with US President Donald Trump, along with the British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, and also the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel. Now,
and Macron.
Yes, and Macron, of course, obviously, he's the host. Well, how do you view the potential of such side talks, even though they're not specified specific summits between Egypt, the president, and the leaders of these countries, but rather they're on the sidelines? Can you please highlight how important it is, these sideline meetings, and what could be the outcome of it between the president and these leaders?
I understand. By the way, the meeting between two leaders, it depends on the weight of each one of them. It goes without saying, when some leader in the world meets the United States president, that the weight of the United States president is so big, I understand.
Yes.
And it goes the same goes with Macron or Merkel. So the problem will be with the third world party, Egypt, in this point or this respect. I think it depends on what the third world party achieved, either in his country, in his region, you see, and in the world in general.
Yes.
And I think this applies to the Egyptian party, who went, as you know, and as all of us know, as a chairman of the African Union, as a person or a leader who is concerned not only with Egypt, with its limits and borders, political borders, but with Egypt as a potential, or as, I'll not say leader now, as a vital power, a force in the region itself, especially as far as Libya is concerned, for example. You see, Libya is a very big country with a lot of potential, but in the same time there is this catastrophe of the collapse of the national state, you see. And that's why Mr. Sisi concentrated his work and emphasized the point of keeping and trying to push forward the national state. It doesn't only apply to Libya. Look at, as my friend referred to a country like Nigeria.
Yes.
It's one of the most important producing or petroleum producers in Africa, okay? But now, all the potential in a country like Nigeria, with its all potential, you see, is threatened every day by Boko Haram.
Yes.
In the same time, Somalia, with a big potential agriculture, in the same time, the site of Somalia vis-a-vis the African corn and all these things, it is in the same time, the everyday life in Somalia cannot be borne by people. Why? Because they have Al-Shabaab people there. All these things threatens the future of the African continent, country by country. That's why we have to take care of the new generation, the youth generation in Africa, in order to save these people, these generations, from falling victims to the Islamic extremism, and all these things. In the same time, we have to keep also all the time a vital cooperation link between us and the other African countries, under the slogan which we in the United Nations we wrote about it a lot, South-South cooperation.
Yes.
This is one of the key paths which can take us out the misery in which the African people are living.
Yes, definitely. Dr. Fahim, now talking about the sustainable development, the renewable energy, now part of the main assets for the African continent is its own population. And it was a theme that was highlighted during the G7 summit, which is gender equality, women empowerment, fighting extremism, the religious discourse, and the reinvention, the religious dialogue. Now, with Egypt working on all these fronts, how do you view the other partners of the G7 actually? How can they help, or does that give them an impression that we actually mean business, we're serious about what we're doing? How is that going to be translated into helping the African continent and Egypt in really establishing and help grow this sustainability?
You first started by population.
Yes.
So you're talking about, we're talking
the
about
human aspect
mainly
of it. Yes.
The aged continent. I wouldn't have, already I'm starting at the aged continent. Population, like we have the population, so, but that we need to train them. It's when they said in 2014, when the first came, our President Sisi, and he said to the Chinese and Indians and Russians, when the three countries they started to said that we are going to start the infrastructure and to build the industrial zone. And one of the main discussion was the workers and the workers and the people will work in these factories will be Egyptians. And we just we said that we agreed upon that 90% will be Egyptian. They said train them. That's what they said. Train them. And that's why, if you see the President Sisi, since 4 years, with the Africans, he's saying, and he's concentrating on the youth.
Yes,
come on, guys, all youth, Egyptians and Africans. We're defenders of Africa now. And these are our brothers, and this is our continent. And as we said, nobody will abuse it anymore. Okay, they're starting the religious wars.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I don't see it religious, because I don't remember in the 80s or the 90s religion had its weight, whether in Europe or in the Christianism or the Islam, it didn't have that weight. Okay, but as we said, with the Great Depression, it's always we're having the problem, the anger of nature and the religious problems. I remember when in the 1500s, for example, when it started in France and then England, the massacres of, well, like the massacres now between the Protestants and the Catholics. Okay, there were real massacres, and the people left Paris, and they were escaping, and massacres. I'm talking about real massacres. Forget about what we're seeing now. It was what happened before. It's are you trying to do it now for what reason? To destroy us? No, it's not a matter of destroying. It's a matter of now the whole world, the whole earth is facing a huge problem. There is no room to destroy. And the earth is getting angry more and more. And this Amazon crisis, it did not last that long.
Yes.
Did not last that long, and we lost 20% of our oxygen. With the pollution and this, we're facing a very speedy crisis. A very speedy crisis. We need, all of us, we need Africa. All of us.
Yes.
Africa does not need us. Yeah, they can live on the nature.
Well, at least good thing is that they allocated $20 billion for the reforestation of the Amazon.
And by the way, I'll add a little thing. We are calling the Amazon forests not only for the 20% air. It is the rainforests.
Yes.
You see, the destruction, the wiping out of these forests in the Amazon. And by the way, the Amazon is not only in Brazil, but along
Latin America.
Latin America,
yes,
you see, but Brazil is the biggest.
Is the biggest part.
You see. The wiping out or the deforestation of the Amazon means a big harm to the sources of water all over. I mean, the fresh water in lakes, fresh water in rivers, among them the River Nile, by the way, and the other rivers in Africa itself will be affected. And the rainfall measures.
And the animals there and the people, the communities living there as well. Yes.
Water is everything. If we have this thing, you see, it's a catastrophe, not only about the air, it's also about the water in the world.
Mr. Khouly, one final question, because we're running out of time. Now, you've highlighted the importance of the sideline meetings between the President and the four leaders of the UK, France, the US, and Germany. Now,
and the Prime Minister of Italy, by the way.
Now, how can we actually translate these sideline meetings and their influence? Can these people influence the UN to actually take necessary practical measures, since they are some of the biggest players within the UN?
When you talk about the UN, you see, the UN can help you in providing you with some expertise, some experts in different things, in industry, in whatever, in population, you see, because this is the good thing in the UN. But as far as the politics is concerned, I think the UN is crippled. Why? The most important organ in the UN, this is my experience working in the UN, is the Security Council. The Security Council's paralysis is due to the veto. Unless you correct this thing, all the time the resolutions will be vetoed, and in the same time you will reach nothing. That's the problem of the Palestinian question in the UN.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, definitely the African continent has been under the spotlight for the G7 summit and the upcoming TICAD summit taking place from the 28th till the 30th of August. The President Sisi, head of the African Union, also has been present in the G7 summit. He's going to be inaugurating, along with the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, the TICAD 7th summit in Yokohama tomorrow. The presidential and leading role Egypt is playing within the region and for the African continent is not to be underestimated. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. But before we go, I'd like to thank our very distinguished guest, Mr. Mohammed Khouly, the international media expert. I'd also like to thank Dr. Ramy Fahim, the strategic planning and economic expert. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nile International. I'm Hani Saif. Thank you for joining us.